Welcome back here to X's and Bros, Michigan Sports Network. Great to have you right along with us, no matter who you are, where you are, how you may be listening all across the great state of Michigan and in Northwest Ohio. That's Ben Glaze and Ryan Elke. I'm Anthony Bellino. Join us on the horn right now covering Michigan State football and, most importantly, this time of year, men's basketball for the Free Press. Our good friend, Chris Solari. You can find him on Twitter at Chris Solari. Chris, good morning to you, my man. How are you? How's life? How are things, partner?
Good morning, Anthony. It's the back end of a long season between football and basketball. So just trying to push through some of the things that happen when you're on the road all the time, with the weather going crazy on me. So otherwise doing good.
I love to hear that. And you think about the football season this year. I mean, maybe some weary expectations and everything that, took place there. And it's like, oh, let's not go back through that. But then you look to basketball. It's like, okay, preseason number 4, we're cooking with gas. James Madison, they just punched their ticket. Congratulations. The winningest team in all of college basketball, 31 wins in the regular season. Pretty great number for them. That's where the Spartan season started, with the 79-76 loss to James Madison. Michigan State finishes up the year 10-10 in the conference, 18-13 overall, losers of 4 of their last 5. So all that doom and gloom to set you up for this. When you look back at the 23-24 regular season campaign, what do you make of this?
Boy, that's a good question, because it's hard to make anything. It's hard to make heads or tails of anything. We've seen this team play some of the best basketball in the country against some of the top teams in the country, and they beat Illinois. They were pretty – I think they lost by 9 to Duke. They were right there with Arizona after a slow start. And, some of the things that plagued them early in the year, the bad shooting that they had in that James Madison game from outside, that was here and there and up and down all year. The slow starts, like I said about the Arizona game, all up and down. You saw that more early in the year, and they kind of corrected that for the most part from January onward until Sunday. The rebounding has been an issue, and they've been up and down at times with that. That's the easiest way you think you could take it. The biggest takeaway is that everything has been a struggle, and nothing has been consistent except the inconsistency.
It's been the shooting aspect as well. I know that a lot of Spartan fans, and Ryan on the other side, he's going to be like, he might throw a computer screen over this, but the questions on the interior with the, Sissoko just never panned out to be what a lot of people thought that he was going to be. And we could all just kind of accept that and move on. But when you look at the front court and the struggles there, some people want to point to the portal and not going out and addressing that. And I know that a lot of Spartan fans are very, very boisterous about that online, right? They want to go to the portal and get the biggest 7-footer you can find that's going to give you 20 and 10 on any given night. But outside of the inability
the mythical center.
Yes. Whoever this center is, the Zach Edey for the Spartans. But when you look at the struggles that have been plaguing this team from the outside, right? They haven't necessarily shot it that great from 3. When we look at the interior, to me, it seems like there's a path, at least on the outside. You look at Xavier, you look at Cooper, like you have some big bodies in there. Those guys are just going to have to develop into guys that are going to be able to give you 30 minutes a night.
Yeah, 3 of those 4 guys are 2 sophomores and a freshman. And, between Cooper, Kohler, and Booker. The hope was Sissoko would be able to get you to a point where you could maybe move one of those guys into the starting group. But obviously Booker was farther behind, I think, than maybe people thought coming into the year. And it's taken him a while to – and really in the Indiana game you saw on the outset where his issues lie defensively, and they found themselves down 20-5 right out of the gate. Because Indiana is the first team to really, with Booker on the court and in that early capacity, just attack inside. And listen, that everything has its reaction, right? For every action, there's a reaction. So for the inability to do things in the post on offense, that now allows defenses to sag off those guys because outside of Booker, there's not a jump shooter. And when you have that, now all of a sudden the lanes that A.J. Hoggard or Jaden Akins and Tyson Walker want to drive are getting clogged up by the extra man just going off the big man. You're able to pay more attention outside. You're able to double Malik Hall like Indiana did in that game, and be more disruptive for the opponent. I mean, so it's all those outside shots, and they've had good shots. I think they haven't fallen, but they've also had some contested shots because teams are able to pay more attention, knowing that they're basically playing 4-on-5 right now on that end of the court, so their defense can focus in on those three guards.
Chris, do you think that with the way that this team has finished up the regular season, right? And I want to start here with the coach, Tom Izzo. How has he been this year? Because, I listened to the coach's show, and, he does a great job of being able to work the crowd and the fans. God bless him. Some of the elderly folks there, and they razz him a little bit. And he gives it right back to him, and I've always really enjoyed his personality, off the court. I think that he's just one of those guys that gets it, and he knows that, from a branding standpoint, he knows where he stands. But how has he been this year handling basically the consistent, inconsistent play?
I mean, he's as frustrated as anybody, and I think some of it is that he's as of Sunday, he's starting to call out names, which is really unlike him. I mean, two of the guys that he called out in that post-game press conference, Jaden Akins for not making the shots, and Tyson Walker for not taking some shots early. Both of those guys bypassing some. In the complexity of the whole situation too, he's saying in the early part of the game, they were taking too many threes with the wrong guys in some ways. I think Hoggard took a few, but because Akins and Walker weren't looking for him, and he went at them, and then he also called out Kohler for getting beat back on a break and getting beaten over the top. I mean, he actually called him out right in the middle of the game, and it was right at midcourt. Then called him out in the post game again about it. So I mean, there's frustration points. I think he even said it. He said, he's tired of getting blamed for these things when the players aren't producing. But at the same point, he's also the one who put together the roster. When you mentioned the portal, there might not have been that 20 and 15 guy out there, but there were plenty of guys that were more than serviceable big men. And again, I think from the fans' perspective, this is the up and down and fluctuation of the whole thing. They also thought they were going to have Jackson Kohler for the whole year and healthy and in a better place than he was as a freshman, because he had lost weight and he was looking quick in the summer. It wasn't, the Summer Moneyball League in Lansing isn't a great indicator of future success, but it does show you what guys have been working on. And he looked quick, he looked agile, he looked like he was able to do some of the things that he wasn't as a freshman. Then he has a foot injury, and he misses half the year. So, that's where not going after another big man came back to bite Izzo. So his frustrations, I think, are multiple. I think they're internal with himself. I think they're with his staff. And I think they're also largely with the roster that is underproduced based on their own expectations.
Chris Solari joining us right now. You can find him on Twitter at Chris Solari. And Chris, it's Tom Izzo. It's Michigan State, right? It's a pretty synonymous brand with this month that we call March. So my question to you would be, they have Minnesota tomorrow at noon, game 1 of the Big Ten tournament, right? It kind of feels like a must win, because if not, you're looking at a team that finishes, 8th in the conference. Can you get 8 Big Ten teams in a year where I don't think there's as much respect for the Big Ten overall? Do you see it feasible? Do you think there's a way that the committee would leave Michigan State out?
Well, I think you got to look at the totality, by the way, of those standings, because they win that Indiana game. They could have been in a tie for third place, because this is what's going on in the Big Ten. I mean, there's Purdue, there's Illinois, and then there's everybody else, and then there's Michigan.
We're so bad.
Really,
we're so bad.
Really,
Chris.
Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State too. I mean, they're Penn State. I mean, there's a couple teams down there that knew their fate pretty early, and they know that the only way they're getting to a postseason is to win out this week in Minneapolis. Michigan State's in that middle, and it's the muddled middle of the Big Ten, but it's nationally like this too. I mean, there's so many of those, similar 18 and 13, 500 level teams in conference play this year. I mean, Kansas had a down year. There's you look all around the country, and there's a lot of this. I don't know if parity is the right word or mediocrity is the right word. In some ways, it's both. So you look at the metrics. Michigan State looks wonderful in the metrics. They play the tough schedule. They had the gumption to bring James Madison in and bring Indiana State in. These, low mid-majors that have been outstanding basketball teams. So they weren't afraid to take on teams. And they beat Indiana State, mind you, and they lost to James Madison. They take on the Arizonas and the Dukes. And so those things are there. And I think that you look at some of their best games, and there's not a team in the country that they can't play with when they're playing at their optimal best. But, again, those nights are as equally infrequent as the nights where they're losing at Minnesota and losing a lead there, or losing the lead at Indiana, or getting off to a terrible start. I mean, it's hard to project and predict this team. Do I think they get in the tournament? I think those measurables help. And you mentioned about the must-win situation. It's been must-win since January. I mean, they started off the Big Ten season 1-4, and they won 10 of 13 games. So there's been a stretch of I don't want to say really good basketball, because there are some clunkers in there too, but they've shown the ability to win, and they've shown the ability to lose. I don't know. I mean, I think this is probably the most tenuous it's been in the last quarter century. You know how long it's been since Michigan State missed the tournament? I was in college there.
25 years.
25 years.
Wow. What a streak, right? What a streak. What a testament. You mentioned, they beat that Illinois team that was ranked 10th at the time. They go on the road and beat Penn State. They whack Michigan, because who doesn't at this point? And you're like, okay, there's 3 in a row. All right, it's back to Michigan State being Michigan State. And then it's like the wheels fell off the bus here down the home stretch. I do have to ask you, from a college basketball, from a general perspective, you mentioned something I want to go back to. Was it parity or was it mediocrity? Why does it feel like this year has just lacked some serious juice? I don't know what it is. I mean, outside of a guy with a nickname of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, what is the big story? Dalton Connect? What are we talking about? Where's the juice, Chris?
I mean, listen, in basketball, so much of basketball is based on knowledge of your teammates and the rhythm that comes with it. And again, there's not necessarily good enough empirical data to kind of look at it, but this isn't necessarily a data-driven point. It is more of a observational and chemistry-driven point that some of these teams just don't know each other. I mean, that's the nature of this. I mean, you're seeing, talented freshmen not playing because you have COVID year guys, so the game's a little older, but those COVID year guys have come from other programs oftentimes, and they don't know their teammates. They're just getting to know them, and the teammates behind them are getting frustrated, so there's the trickle-down effect of guys bouncing out and heading elsewhere. I mean, the basketball, I think, more than football, because I think football, listen, they rep, and football's more of a choreographed dance, we'll say. And I think you spend all week working on your choreography for your production. Basketball is more of an innate feel. Basketball is more jazz music. in a lot of ways. And if you don't know the other players, you can sound like a cacophonous mess. But if you know your players well, and you know each other, and you know your traits and habits and where you're going to take the song, it can be masterful. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing in the portal is kind of like that, I think, for basketball teams right now. And there's 360 some of them. So there's going to be more of that. It's going to be more apparent that there's mediocrity and parity with the mediocrity across the country right now. It's a fascinating dynamic, I think, that, it's going to take maybe 5 or 10 years or 5 or 10 more different changes with what we've seen between the portal, NIL, and everything else to kind of stabilize it. But it right now, I think, is an unstable, as unstable as the rest of the college sports landscape.
Chris Solari, part writer, part maestro. I don't even. What'd you say? Carcaphalon? What was that word?
Cacophonous mess.
A cacophonous. Well, I got to get out my thesaurus, Chris. I didn't know I was going to be learning this early. Last one here for you, my friend. We got the Golden Gophers tomorrow at noon. Does Michigan State win this game to advance and then shock the world against Purdue?
I mean, they just lost in Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago at Williams Arena. This moves to the big arena. But, how do you – I mean, that was a game where they lost 59-56. Not much offense. And Tyson Walker got hurt late in that game and then played through it. But it's a home team. It's basically a home game. It's not a home arena, but it's basically a home game for the first time they play in Minneapolis because you couldn't get 2 more points at Indiana. You wouldn't have had to play the home team. So, I think they do. I mean, they beat them by, I think, 11 or 10 or 11 in East Lansing, and they had stretches in that game up in Minneapolis that they looked good, especially defensively. Got to shut down the Christie kid, Max Christie's brother Cam, who we'll find out today if he's the Big Ten Freshman of the Year. He's definitely a talented scorer, a young kid, a freshman who can kind of a clone of Max, and they've got some players. That Minnesota squad, is a tough team. Give Ben Johnson credit, and I know Tom Izzo does. I mean, I think, but you're also looking at a team like Michigan State that lost 4 of its last 5. So
very interesting.
What do you think? I don't know. It's a heck of a script for a noon game in a new city. And by the way, the winner of that game gets Purdue. So. That's
a great prize for winning that game, getting Zach Edey. His name is Chris Solari. Find him on Twitter at Chris Solari. Chris, my friend, thank you so much for your time today, partner. We greatly appreciate it. We'll be following along with the Detroit Free Press.
All right, Anthony. Be well, my friend.